Hi guys, so this is my first video ever and I've been really wanting to do this because well, first I just got a webcam, so thank you so much for throwing down on that. I really wanted to start this video because I wanted to explain a brief overview of like my process, because I know I do a lot of 2D stuff and I do a lot of 3D stuff, and then somewhere in all the mix of that I also like make physical things with like 3D printing, and then I have like this weird doll hobby, and then I also make clothes for a brand. So I wanted to start off with the 3D thing because I get the most questions about it, what software I use, like the steps, how to go about starting. And so I just kind of have this Photoshop file open so I can sort of like draw this out while I explain. But my first step essentially is I usually work in ZBrush or C4D, right? And the reason for this is like ZBrush is great when you kind of just want to start with a block of clay and you don't really know what you want to do. Back in the day, like when 3D programs sort of started out, like if you watch like the Pixar documentary, you can kind of get an idea of how crazy complicated it was because the technology was so limiting. But if you wanted to start making something, you would have to have like a really good idea in your head of what you wanted to do. For example, if you wanted to make a body, right, you'd have to like watch for like the topology and where the lines are going on the grid. I can explain more of that later, but this is really limiting because you would basically have to start with a small cube and sort of like pull out arms, pull out legs, and like craft knowing what the end goal is. But ZBrush kind of just throws this workflow out the window. It really makes it possible for people who are more accustomed to things like clay to simply sculpt. And I can get more into this program later because I've already made a tutorial on, or rather a process video on how I make like 3D shoes. And I mostly use ZBrush, so I wanna show you guys that. But depending on what I'm making, if it's organic and I don't really care, like I'm just starting with like a nail or a shoe, or you know, like soft round things like trees or bodies, I use ZBrush. But if I'm going for something like hard surface like a house or a car, then I would start in Cinema 4D because it's a program that really allows you to make rigid shapes, like think like AutoCAD, you know, for people who do architecture or are familiar with it. It's AutoCAD and Rhino are really great software for hard surface models. So those are the two distinctions. So I usually just sort of start here. So this is step one. And from here, I would go into Substance. And I love Substance. And a lot of people don't know about Substance, but I would really recommend it. It's this little red thing down here. But Substance is great because it allows you to make a texture for your model. So in the case of my shoes, I usually bring it to Substance. Here, let me actually just open it and we can like check it out. I don't know why that dude is on there, but Adobe just bought it, which is kind of cool, but it's not part of the Adobe Pack subscription. But I'm gonna give it a second to pop open. I have not updated, I'm not going to yet, but I want to show you, for example, you can see all of these extremely realistic materials. I can like open up something here. Oops. So you open up, I'm getting like too into this, but let's say for the sake of example, I just have like a ball model here. And let's say I wanted to use this texture, and this is called, what is this called? Haussmannian Zinc. And Dom is home. Hi, Dom. So I would, yeah, I'm filming right now. Wow. Like, wow. This is so nerve-wracking because I'm not used to talking at cameras, but he just got the laundry, which is why he's panting so hard. But as you can see, this program allows you to sort of like slap cool textures on it. And it works like Photoshop, so you can see like the layers right here. And for the sake of example, because this is probably like, this is how I made that dragon for my recent job, I used something called Scale, Armored Dragon Scales, of course. Yes, I used this. So you can see how like you can like make it smaller, to scale, and you can see how it looks like it's actually changing the geometry, and that's because it's got, you know, a normal map which you can toggle on and off, a height map which you can toggle on and off, and you can go in here and basically like mess with all these colors. Like you can literally make these all other colors. You can also add another layer on top, and for the sake of example, just make it blue. So yeah, this is a really great program, and this is kind of my second step. After I get it in Substance, I generally take it back into C4D. Where I sort of put everything together. But some people were like, well, how do you get clothes if you're making a model? Well, I would go into another program called Marvelous Designer. Ooh, sorry, I'm like slow writer. But from Marvelous, that's a really cool program too. I'll just pop open that one for a second and kind of show you guys what's good with it. But Marvelous Designer is, it's by this company called Clo, and basically you can create 3D patterns and then simulate them in a gravity setting in real time. So this is how we were able to get the clothes working in the runway. But it's also how I get, you know, clothes on all of my 3D bodies. And these are just like sample project files that I didn't do, but I'll just like open them up for the sake of example. This one I guess is like a backpack, which is kind of cute. But as you can see on the panel on to the right, we have all these patterns, and on the left is like the actual object. And for the sake of example, I'm gonna press the simulate button, which is like where the gravity is applied, and because there's no person wearing it, you'll see that it just sort of boop, falls onto the ground, which is kind of cool, you know. And people do really cool stuff in this program. Like, it's not limited to clothes. You could easily, this one has a bit of bounce because they made the fabric a bit rigid, which is cool. But if you check out stuff like this dress, you'll see that it requires an avatar for it to sort of like keep its form, right? Because it's like not as rigid. But yeah, so I usually go through this program and then I'll take it into Substance because that's where I make it look super realistic, and then it goes back to C4D. I get a lot of questions about Keyshot. Early when I first started out with the 3D stuff, I started using Keyshot as my renderer because in C4D can render, however, not that great. I mean, it's okay, but there are like these industry standards for like better renders, and in C4D, and this is applicable if you're using like Maya, or I think some people use Blender as well. But for C4D, the most popular choice is probably between Octane and Redshift. And I really recommend Octane for beginners because I just recently had to learn how to use it in like 48 hours because I was working on a project, and my partner who's working on it only knows how to use Octane, and he had already set up the project files in Octane. So I was like, oh shoot, I have to read this. But the manual is actually set up almost like to be trendy or hip or something. Like, the manual for Redshift sounds like a scientist is speaking, but the one for Octane is much less intimidating, and I highly recommend it if you're just getting started and you have a neat GPU, which if you're a gamer, you probably do. But from C4D, I render using Octane or Redshift, and I say both because I recently learned Octane. They're both subscription models, but I think Redshift might be a flat fee. Don't quote me on that. I'm not actually sure. But yeah, this is essentially my entire 3D process. From there, once I have renders, I generally take it into Premiere and make the final video. But sidestepping, Keyshot. Keyshot is another place to render, and I really recommend it if you are somebody who's just building like, how do you say it? Like mock-ups of like toys or like designs, and you're not really pressed about like animation, because Keyshot is not the place to to render animations, simply because you can't get rigs, like skeleton rigs in there. More on that later. But it's great if you just want to like open it up and just like throw some materials on it and press a button and get an image. And I will really quickly demonstrate here. Let's say for the sake of example, we have just a bunch of stuff open. Okay, so this is just like, you know, a piece I did for WMag for Korea. so many moons ago. But in the materials, you'll see that, you know, they're already divided by types. Let's just go for the sake of example. I don't know, this one looks cool. We're in metals right now, maybe like a rusted metal. So as you can see, this is like really, the texture is just really big. So let me edit this material in here. And we can maybe turn down the size of it, or maybe it's a ratio. I've never played with this material before, so I have no idea what I'm doing. Value, contrast. How does one edit this? Interesting. Weight. I guess it's just set to that size and you can't edit it, but I'm sure with a bit more tinkering I could figure it out. But since I've never used that one, I have no idea. I'm gonna try this one. Oop. What happened? Oh, I know what happened. There is an opacity map on this, and the opacity map must be huge, and that's why you can't see anything. There, so see how like it's missing some spaces? It's because this map is humongo. Yeah, see I'm like moving the texture. I figured as much. So how do I make this shape diameter? Let's make this tiny. Oh, there we go. We're getting something. So one. Alright, so that's too small. Maybe like if I make it super small. The fall off. Oh, and then the spacing. See this. Okay, there we go. So that looks more like what you see here. So as you can see, I'm editing the size of the opacity map, and that gives me a different look entirely. And yeah, so Keyshot's really cool for this, and then you just hit render and it'll give you really pretty renders. Also on alpha channel, it's super easy to use. This is definitely where I started, just because I didn't understand render settings yet, which is like an entire conversation on its own. But yeah, I hope this is a good idea of what the heck happens on my computer. Okay, I'm gonna end that there.